Alright. One thing that Ron Williams got an awful lot of praise for was his ability to go back and forth between really comedic and really dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
And so people started to know him for these more dramatic parts, and he started getting a lot of notices for that. It's where a majority of his Oscar nominations came from. But we'll know about half of them, I guess. So, half of 4 is 2, by the way. So, but then, after that was pretty much established and everybody had accepted that fact, the year 2002 came along, and he kind of wanted to take the dramatic actor thing to the next level. So, at opposite ends of the year, we got 2 different performances from him. One came out in May and one came out in September. Which technically they're still about that far apart when you go the reverse, because One Hour Photo actually started at Sundance. So, yes, he was just he kind of littered himself throughout the year with these 2 performances that I don't necessarily jump on calling similar, but they're not without comparison. So,
hence why this video exists.
Yes, and it's just weird that they happen to be in the same year. It's just like he kind of went off in one year and was just like, you know what, I think I'm gonna be totally psychotic this year, just to see what happens. And we get 2 of his most memorable performances out of it. So, I guess we'll start with Insomnia, which is Christopher Nolan's 3rd movie. This is before he really took off. Actually, this was his follow-up to Memento. Actually, so. The people that knew that, which I think were kind of few at the time, much fewer than now, had kind of high expectations for it along with the cast. I remember vividly, I can't remember what, this would have been 13 years ago now. I cannot remember for the life of me what movie it was, but I remember so vividly the reaction in the theater the first time I saw this trailer. Because I think I only saw it on one thing, too. There were quite a few people in there, and the trailer begins, and we see them going to Alaska, and we see Hilary Swank introduce herself to Pacino, and we get the whole scenario about Kay Connell being found beaten to death and stuff like that, and she's only 17 years old, and it kind of builds to him, and he gets the phone call, Dormer gets the phone call, and then they show them maybe on the pier scene. And the trailer reveals that the killer is Robin Williams, and then his name comes up. Because they kind of lined it up that way, where Al Pacino's name had just come up, and no trace of him yet. And then he gets the phone call, and then he's there, and then his name comes up. The reaction in that theater is something I will never unhear. Because that was really, really unheard of when this movie came out. And people were just kind of floored by the fact that he was playing this part. And so that got it a lot of attention at the time. Though unfortunately I didn't get to see it while it was in theaters. It was when as soon as it came out on DVD, I did, though. So, it's also worth noting before we really go into it, that it's the remake of a Norwegian movie from 1997, I want to say, with Stellan Skarsgård.
I buy that.
And while I don't necessarily want to bash that movie, I will just say, despite the fact that I did see this one first, I don't know if that gives me a bias automatically or something, but I really feel like this one handles the story a much better way. With because the performances are just, extraordinary, and then you have, the original is really, really atmospheric and does have a really, really, distinguishable tone to it, but there's just something about the way Nolan handles this one that I think really etches in your mind a lot more. I don't really remember that much about the other one, but this one was etched in my mind almost immediately after seeing it, and then I saw it again and again and again and again, and that probably helped. But the thing that's really, really intriguing here is that it seems like it's kind of a played out concept where you have a detective and a killer that play mind games with each other. A cat and mouse game, if you will. But the thing about it is this movie builds itself up as a mystery in the first half. You don't really, unless you saw the trailer, of course, you don't know that the killer will be readily revealed to us right in the middle of the movie, and it's going to take a whole other path from there. But the first half, it's this really, really intriguing mystery, and it's not just the mystery of Kay Connell's death that's looming over us. There's also this, the very cryptic conversations he has with Martin Donovan's character about the deal that's going on, and the fact that Pacino could very well get in trouble and fired because of an internal affairs investigation where he planted evidence. Which we don't know that it's planted evidence immediately, but we get those. It gets Nolan's kind of doing his arty thing where we get glimpses of it throughout the movie, just flashes of it, but we don't know what it is, and it's slowly, gradually revealed to us by the end. But they're being real cryptic about it for a while, so we have all these kind of different things kind of unfolding at the same time as this murder mystery plays out. And then once he gets the first call from Walter Finch and we realize that's the direction this is going, it turns into a whole other thing. And they do this, it gets a lot of Hitchcock comparisons, which are totally founded. But it's not just the normal... It just doesn't strike as the normal kind of thriller. There's something really, really... Yeah, if you've seen enough thrillers, you've probably seen enough to where this would come off as... I know a lot of people... The critics went nuts for this when it came out. I remember that vividly. Yeah. But people didn't really seem to take to it as much. And a lot of people I talk to now just say they find it kind of generic.
I slept on this movie. I didn't see it theatrically either.
So you haven't seen it at all, then?
No, I've seen it. You actually recommended it to me.
I remember that.
And you showed it to me. And that's the only time I've seen it. And I can imagine...
I totally forgot that happened.
I can imagine watching that in the theater and how silent it would be in some of those scenes.
Oh, what really sucks for my brother was he had just started. This is the movie that was playing when he first started there. It was when this and Spider-Man were out together.
Yeah.
And he was cleaning movies where you just kind of... Normally you go in, see that the movie's still on, and then you leave and go do something else until you come back. But
correct.
Back in the day, the popular thing was just to wait around.
Yep.
So my brother saw the end of this movie before he saw any of it, which really sucks because the ending is not really what you're expecting from if you're looking at it as a generic thriller. But just the way it unfolds and how Finch wants to play, because the thing that makes it so intriguing is how, once again, I know it seems like a cliche on the surface, but they are very, very similar characters, which is what makes their game so intriguing to watch. They both suffer from insomnia, obviously, so they do the late night phone calls when they can't sleep. And Finch even mentions things that Dormer's been doing, like, have you gotten rid of the alarm clock yet? Don't worry, that doesn't help. Then there's the whole, Finch actually says that he writes detective novels because he wanted to be a cop when he saw his grandmother's purse stolen when he was little. And it's always something that intrigued him. And of course, both of them see both murders they have committed as accidents. Because obviously, Hap was more or less going to turn Dormer over for planting evidence. And when he shoots Hap in the fog, we can clearly see it as an accident because the fog makes him totally blind, and the fact that he hasn't been sleeping. We can totally buy that it was an accident, and in the long run, it probably was. But the fact that Hap was going to turn him over to internal affairs always makes you wonder if it was or not. And then we actually get to that point in the end where he himself says, I don't know anymore if it was an accident. And then we get Finch's whole story of how clearly Finch's murder was not an accident because, as Pacino says, it took him 10 minutes to beat her to death. That's not an accident.
No.
And the fact that it was done so brutally. But Finch just sees it as oops, I got carried away. The end. Because he wanted to be a cop. As far as we know, he had never done anything like this prior to that. Mm. And the dude's like middle-aged. This is just something that just happened to him for the first time. You can probably have a theory that he has maybe done it before, but he's so open with Dormer in their relationship. I think if he had killed somebody before, okay, he would have mentioned it. I'm pretty sure of that. So
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think we're really supposed to assume this is his only run-in with it, but you always take in mind what Pacino says at the very beginning. If he crossed the line this much, it's going to happen again, regardless, no matter what. Even if this was the first time, it won't be the last. So just watching this back and forth between these two characters, played by these two particular actors, watching them together in the same scenes, even when they're not in the same scene, even when they're just on the phone, there's just something between the two of them that just really, really, sets the screen on fire whenever they're doing their back and forth. And yeah, if you want to talk, it does kind of evoke other thrillers. There is one thing I've always noticed about this, even though it's done in just as good of a way, and it doesn't bother me at all if you want to consider it lifted. There is a scene in Insomnia that is lifted directly from Seven.
Mm-hmm.
Like, completely. Where Dormer goes to investigate his apartment, and he goes and he searches around, and he doesn't really he finds incriminating things, but not too incriminating. And then, while he's in the apartment, Finch comes home, and then a chase ensues that results in the killer getting away. Yes, that is a scene directly out of Seven, of course. But they're handled in just the right ways. A lot of some critics apparently complained that it was Warner Brothers' fault that there's some action in this movie, because it ends with a shootout and there's a foot chase and all that. But I thought those were handled really well and still in a really realistic way, especially the chase scene with what's really great, especially in like Seven, you can actually compare against it. When you look at like the chase scene in Seven, John Doe has like superhuman running abilities, and he's just jumping around everywhere. And it seems like Mills just cannot catch him to save his life. The chase in Insomnia is it's realistic to the point that it's almost absurd to watch. Like, it's almost kind of funny in a way, because it's a full-on chase for them, but there are moments in it where they're only like this far apart. But that just only adds to he was so fucking close to him and he still ended up getting away, and it just adds to the frustration of the whole thing. And that there are chases in real life that probably look identical to that. If you want to believe that an author like Walter Finch has the ability to hop over log jams, which is fine in itself. He needed to get away somehow. And that's a really fucking claustrophobic scene when Dormer falls in between it and gets stuck underneath them. That scene's kind of hard to watch. Like I was talking about with Rogue Nation last week. Underwater shit gets to me after a while. And of course, we have these really big names here on the cover here. Obviously, Academy Award winner is listed 3 times. But the rest of the cast is quite admirably low-key. Because we have, like I said, Martin Donovan, who obviously you know, but has never really had a huge part. He did a movie called Collaborator with David Morse that I recommend. That he also directed, I believe. He's good in his limited screen time, obviously. Mara Tierney is the owner of she works at the hotel, and she does everything. If you don't know her name, she was Fletcher Reed's ex-wife in Liar Liar. You have Nicky Katt, who I love so much in The Dark Knight, as you learned, as one of the cops. Paul Dooley is the superior cop. Funny story about him while we're on him. I don't know, surely you'd have to be familiar with his name, but if you aren't, he's probably in about 20 movies that you've seen. He's most famous for Breaking Away and so many other things. He's also a comedy legend that worked with Carol Burnett a lot. He's actually from around here. And there was a screening of Breaking Away and Robert Altman's A Wedding here. And there was kind of an impromptu meet and greet afterwards. And in the event, I had to anticipate that meet and greet. I was wondering if it was going to happen. So I thought I should get him to my mom said maybe you should get him to sign something. And so I was like, I have no idea what. And then I said, well, Insomnia is probably my favorite movie that he was in. We'll try that. And sure enough, after the screening for Breaking Away, there was an impromptu meet and greet, and I got that signature on the inside. Yeah. Because he took a look at the case and immediately said, "That's going to be pretty hard to sign." And I was like, "Yeah, just the inside will probably work, because that's a little too black." But so that's a fun little anecdote. Now, the thing about it is also the way it's put together, because it's clear here that even though this is only his third movie, obviously Memento really proves something, but this one's definitely not near as showy as Memento was in regards to its style, because obviously Memento has the whole what it is. Whereas this is just kind of a it's almost like you could tell he was kind of trying to go a little more low-key intentionally, because he went for a story that's relatively simple after something like Memento, and it's a remake of another movie. So it's kind of like he said, Memento was so high concept, he kind of intentionally just said, let's take it easy on this next one. And he ended up making, I've learned the hard way many times from various fans, that it is totally unpopular to say this, but yeah, of everything he's done, from the small movies like Following to the huge movies like The Dark Knight to the even bigger movies like Interstellar, and as much of a fan as I am of him, really, of every single one of his movies, The Prestige, fucking everything, Insomnia is my favorite Nolan movie still.
Mm-hmm.
I really just think it's a masterpiece. It's one of my favorite movies, which once again is kind of a spoiler for which one I'm going to choose. That happens sometimes. But there's still a style to it. Like, I guess you could say it's flashy when we have the flashes of him planting evidence before we know what's going on. But the thing that I love about it is, and you could probably see it as making it look a little reckless or whatever, but I love how it seems like as the movie progresses and gets closer to the climax, the editing gets more rapid. Like, even in mundane scenes, it just feels like the movie is kind of a little bit ahead of us as far as knowing that the climax is coming and getting us mentally prepared for that in our subconscious. And I thought that was a really brilliant way to do it. And it's really, yeah, despite the fact that, you've probably seen movies like it before, the point is that between the way it's handled and the performances and the way that the story doesn't always go in the direction it looks like it's going to, and the way sometimes it does manage to go into unconventional places also, it's pretty much just, in a nutshell, everything that should be and would be in a perfect thriller is in this movie. And that's really all there is to it.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's really... Like I said, I know a lot of people don't see it that way, but it's really a perfect movie in my eyes. I really cannot point out a flaw in it. So, our next movie, another one where its reputation was... I can't remember if we even had this here. I think we did for like a week or something.
Yep.
I think I remember seeing it on the road sign. Yeah, around
It did nothing here, and it left just really quick.
Well, this movie came along, and once again, it was another one of those... I think, if I remember correctly, when it came out, people who didn't, follow Sundance or anything, weren't aware just how dark it was. I think they thought it was just Robin Williams in a weird role about a photo guy. I don't think they realized it was like a real, under your skin type thriller.
Oh, God. We've been doing that a lot lately.
Well, I had an experience the first time I saw 1 Hour Photo, but I'll kind of get to that eventually. When it starts out, we already know something terrible has happened, because this is one of those times where it actually kind of benefits from the start at the end and then work your way back thing. I think normally that's a structure choice that I don't really get a lot of the time, because it's just like, why? But here, it sets you off immediately knowing that something horrible happened, because the very first scene is him getting his mugshot taken. So you know something escalated, you just don't know to what degree. And it really shows off his character immediately, and you are drawn to him because of one line that sets off the movie. And from then on, you're like, okay, I really want to know what this guy's deal is. He's clearly done something horrible, and he's had his mugshot taken, and he's sitting in an interrogation room. And they're talking about the pictures of evidence. And the first thing he says is, do you print these in your own lab, or do you have to have them sent out? And that's like his main concern right now. And then we go back, and it's just, as we were talking about before with The Gift, which I sensed a lot of this movie in that movie.
Yeah, completely.
Where it starts off as somebody who seems totally harmless, and generally we kind of really, really progress, and eventually it gets more and more out of control. But this movie takes a different approach. One that I'm still not quite sure how to fathom. Even I've seen this movie like 6 times now, and I still don't quite know how they handle this. It's certainly an interesting way. This isn't a criticism or anything. But what they do is they really seem to have juggled the scenes in a totally different order than they would be in another movie. Because we have his first scene when he's at the shop, and everything seems fine. He's really friendly with the family and his co-workers and everything seems nice, and he just seems like a misunderstood, lonely guy. And we get that one little clue really quick in there when she orders 2 prints of the picture she's putting in, and he writes down 3. And you think maybe it was just an accident or something, or maybe it's an inventory thing or whatever. I don't know. You're just guessing. And then immediately we are introduced to the kind of character he is. There's really no build-up. We already know because we just saw the interrogation room scene, but they kind of let us know immediately what exactly he's up to, because it's in this very next scene that we see he has pictures of this family. It's Michael Vartan and Connie Nielsen and their son. He has pictures of them in frames on his dresser in his bedroom, and you think that's creepy when you see it. But then it pans over, and he has an entire wall, like this size wall, which goes all the way down. You can't see it on camera, but you've seen enough of these videos to piece together how big this wall is.
Yeah.
And it's just filled, and it's like this whole gigantic collage of just them.
It's unsettling, it really is.
And it's not multiple families. It's not everybody who his customers are. It's this one family, and it's every picture they've ever brought to him on this wall on display. And we know that character trait about him immediately. And the reason I say it seems very unconventional, the order these scenes are in, is the following scene is a scene where he's narrating about what his job consists of and his different customers. He's talking about like the cat lady and the porn guy and the cosmetic surgeon. And he's really, kind of joyous in telling us about what his job is. Mm-hmm. This feels so much like it should have been like his first scene, his introductory scene. But we're getting the, hey, this is how my job works thing after we know he's a complete psychopath.
It's true.
And it's just a really interesting way to put those scenes in order. And then we have another scene where he does something totally fucking crazy. And then the next scene where he's walking around at the sale just kind of narrating about why he's so fascinated by pictures. And in his narration, we get no sense whatsoever that this is an insane person. It's just a dude telling us, just communicating with us about what his job is and how he sees things. And if we just had that before we saw the fact that he was in an interrogation room and the fact that he has all the pictures of them, we wouldn't suspect anything. Which they do kind of do a clever thing on that, where before the picture wall is revealed, he's watching The Simpsons, and Bart gets a letter that says he's gonna die, and Bart says, "Who would send this to me?" And Homer says, "The person you least suspect." And as Homer says the line, "It's the person you least suspect," is when we pan over to the wall of pictures. So they used The Simpsons in that kind of light.
That was great.
It's really brilliant, yeah. Now, And the thing about it here is, it's I don't know. It's almost kind of they constantly keep him sympathetic for a while, so it's because like they kind of want us to understand his ordeal of his loneliness and the fact that he has an abusive past. It's almost like they put those scenes in that order, like to keep us as an audience from turning on him, because you kind of like him in the first scene. And then you see the wall of pictures, and you're like, "Oh, okay, this guy is what my nightmares are made of." But then we kind of get his, friendly description of his job. It's almost like he's winning the audience back over, and that's kind of what is a key factor in making. Obviously, the main key factor in his the audience seeing him as a sympathetic figure is in Williams' performance. But I would think the way those scenes are ordered is kind of supposed to kind of drive us in that direction also a little bit. Because you have the scenes where like they send him happy thoughts, and then you just kind of see him in his kitchen just kind of standing there still, like he's actually receiving them and he can sense them. And then there's the thing you have to really look for where apparently this was intentional too. When Vartan sees the picture of Sai that's in the family pictures they just turned in, he throws it down on the table. And it lands next to an open fortune cookie that says someone wants you to be happy. So, it's really... There are things in there that kind of show you that they're giving you both sides of him at once. And they're basically letting you decide whether or not he's sympathetic or totally psychotic. But I think most people, despite the general creepiness of the character, most viewers tend to fall on the sympathetic side, surprisingly. And then you have the stuff, like the soccer game, when he just kind of shows up there with the action figure that he wanted in the story but couldn't have. It does start to make you wonder, this scene is really unsettling, because his appearance, for starters, at a child's soccer game when he does not have a child, just red flags are everywhere already, but... The thing about it is, he's so friendly to Jake in particular, and wants to give him the action figure that he saw. I'm wondering exactly how people would view the scene if we didn't already know that he's crazy. How the soccer scene would be viewed.
Completely different.
I think it would still put people off, like people would say, that's, he's a nice guy, but that's...
Borderline.
But the scene really terrifies people because we already know what he is. So I've always wondered how that would go down. And then we have the scene where it's one of the creepiest scenes of the movie, where he just seems to walk into their house and he puts on Will's clothes and he watches their TV. He uses their bathroom. The picture of him that he took of himself to put in the pictures is on the refrigerator. And they do this fake out where the family comes home and it looks like he's been caught in the act. And then they just refer to him as Uncle Cy, and then we realize it's been a fantasy. Now, the scene is really creepy, so when you realize it's a fantasy, you're like, oh, and there's some relief inside you. Mm. But then just as that relief hits, it hits you again. The fact that he had that fantasy just brings the creepiness right back to it. And of course, as it further progresses, the sympathetic stuff is there, but then as the extremities get worse, like every time he seems like a really likable sympathetic character, the crazy comes out. And the other way around. The scene in the food court comes to mind. When we see him at that sale and he just buys a random picture of a woman that, I guess those are at sales, which is kind of weird. So he runs into her in the food court and they have a nice conversation. And he's so friendly towards her, he wins you over, but at the same time you realize he's only reading the Deepak Chopra book because she was, and he knew that he could get her attention with that. And then there's the scene where he says, the only thing I care about is a picture of my mother. And when he shows the picture of his mother, it's the picture that he bought at the sale. So, you just, throughout the entire movie, just when you feel like you kind of know how to take him, he does something that kind of makes you question it again, and you don't really know what direction you want to take your feelings towards him. Until he just goes full on at the end of it, when he finds out that Will is cheating on Connie Nielsen's character, whose name I obviously can't... Nina is her name. With Aaron Daniels' character. So, this is kind of where we... And obviously this coincides with Gary Cole firing him, because Gary Cole is basically playing an even douchier version of Bill Lumber, basically. It's worth noting, I read something kind of odd to me, that apparently Gary Cole's part was the part that Robin Williams was approached for. Which kind of seems like a nothing role in comparison. He had to be the one to tell them that he wanted to play Zy. So, because it almost kind of feels like it was tailor-made for him, because he really seems like one of the only actors that could have played this part and kept him as sympathetic as he was. Because the wall of pictures, and if it was anybody but Robin Williams, I think the audience would have long given up on him. And he would have been the crazy asshole for the remainder of the movie. But it's what Robin Williams brings to it, and I guess kind of what people kind of already felt towards him prior to the movie itself. Just in general, his performance and the general casting of him really helped the way the audience perceives him. So, but then, and then the thing about the character though is he kind of starts. We already are kind of having a hard time grasping exactly how we're supposed to take him, but then he starts to mix it up even more as his craziness becomes more and more out as he discovers the affair and that after he's been fired. When we see him take the knife out of the glass case and we know shit's about to go down, which once again we already know because he's been arrested by the end of the movie. We already know this, so anything can happen between then and now. Once again, is why that structure actually works here more so than it does in many other movies that use it. But the thing that starts to make the movie really unpredictable is the way he acts towards them seems to change entirely. Because for a long time there, he wants nothing but to be a part of their family. That's the whole fantasy sequence. He visualizes being part of their family entirely, with Will intact and everything. He just wants to be Uncle Si, that's it. But then, when all this goes down, he becomes standoffish towards them all. Because when he gets fired, Nina and Jake show up, and I don't know if it's the free camera is part of what got him fired, and he resents it, I don't know. But he's very, very standoffish to them when they're there, which is really out of character for him. Because these people are pretty much all that he wants in his life. And after he's been fired, he's very... kind of isolates himself from them in a very stern way, almost. And then it gets to a point to where he puts the pictures of Will in their family pictures with intent of watching this family fall apart. Because we kind of think at first when he's leaving Save Mart that he's just going to put him in there and then run away from the damage and let it happen out of sight. But then we realize that he's outside waiting for her, and he follows her to see how she reacts. And then he waits outside the house and watches them eat dinner to watch the fight erupt. And it pisses him off when it doesn't happen. And it's now gotten to the point to where he's so, I guess, bitter towards all of them that it's like he wants to watch them fall apart. It's more of a bitterness towards Will than anybody else, we learn, but maybe he just doesn't realize that he really, really wants to go after Will, but by doing so, in the way that he does, it's tearing the whole family apart. But he becomes a really hard character to read by this point, which makes it all the more intriguing, really. Normally this would be where a movie falls apart with its main character, but it just kind of adds to the intrigue of the whole thing. And then, of course, we get the scene with the two of them in the hotel room, which seems to be spawned from what happened. We get the idea of what happened to him as a child, apparently, we learn in the interrogation room. And then there's the scene with Gary Cole's daughter, where we don't know what he's looking at yet, But it's this really, really unsettling scene where I think we're supposed to initially think he's outside of the Yorkins' house, but he's talking about the origin of the word snapshot and how it used to be a hunting term, and he's not being very subtle about what he means by that. And then we just see him taking pictures over and over again of something we can't see, and it turns out being pictures of Gary Cole's daughter, where the images are getting closer and closer and closer to him as you flip through them. So this is what starts the police investigation and all that. And then you kind of wonder exactly what becomes of him after the interrogation. A lot of people like to question, what all charges were brought against him because there's so many. I'd like to think that he was most likely locked away, not in a prison. With the way, even the cop that's interrogating him, you can tell has sympathy towards him. Because after he goes through the whole story where he's talking about children being degraded in pictures and stuff like that, but it's pretty clear he's talking about something that happened to him. And the cop interrogating him seems really, really understanding in a way to where he's going away, but I don't think it's to prison. Mm-hmm. And then we just kind of have to... And then the really eerie shot where the last shot of the movie is the four of them in a family picture. And it's just one of those movies that really, really gets onto you. The anecdote I was talking about, when it came out on DVD, I was very intrigued by this movie, and I had heard about it, so I got it from Blockbuster. And I was watching it alone, in my bedroom. This does not happen to me. Even when I was younger, this did not happen to me. While watching 1 Hour Photo in my room by myself, I had to turn it off. The first time I got it at Blockbuster, I didn't finish it because it was getting to me way too much. And that's something that really does not happen to me, or didn't happen to me. But yeah, I got about an hour or so in, I think. And then I was like, okay. And then it just kind of sat there. Like it was calling to me, like, you have to finish me, And then I got too scared of it, and we just took it back. And I eventually caught the rest of it on a movie channel. So, yeah, that's a pretty profound effect, because that really is not the kind of thing that happened to me. But this really just got to me in a way that really not many movies have. Of course, I've seen it many times since then, because I'm able to appreciate it for what it is, and being able to, look into dissecting it like this. But that first time was just... It's a pretty unforgettable movie experience every time, but that first time kind of hits you like no other.
Agreed.
Like I said, despite how great it is and despite all that, Insomnia has always been one of my favorite movies since around the time I first saw it, and it's always kind of stuck that way. Because it's that movie that's always been on my favorites list, and I'm like, oh, it'll probably get knocked down a little bit if I watch it again. It'll probably not have as good a factor as it does. It's just as good every time. So, obviously I'd go with Insomnia, but, both movies really have for the people that know them, they kind of have a notorious way about them, where people know them as those movies where Robin Williams really, really went for it, and it paid off both times really, really well. So, yeah.
So we've got another edition of Robin Williams versus. This one's a little bit more, to the point of Robin Williams versus. It's literally his movies against one another. So we brought you up in the beginning. We took you back down as far as we possibly can in here. Next week we're going to go a little bit adventurous. So that's going to be...
I really don't know how I'm going to go about reviewing such those. Because maybe 1 Hour Photo you can dissect all day. I don't know how you do that with these next two, but
we'll see.
We'll figure something out. I'll figure something out.
That's what we've got for next Sunday. Of course, tomorrow will be the return of Gaming with Ash. The Raw Popcast at 11:30. Me, Aaron, and Ashley dissecting Raw. Also, of course, we are 3 weeks away from SummerSlam. It's crazy how this year's gone by so fast. Thank God. So we're actually we're in the 30s now for me for when I get back to Orlando. So that archive will be available on Tuesday. NXT video on Wednesday. Thursday, brand new Sip and Snack will be focusing at the second part of the IKEA series. Friday, AJ's movie reviews will be tackling Underdogs. Excuse me. And God, what I forget things.
I wasn't listening to you. Did you not say The Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Straight Outta Compton. So yeah, that's going to be coming your way. Pop Flashback on Saturday, Brandyverse on Sunday, and that's how we do it all over again. If you have iTunes, you have an iOS device, you can check out Pop on your mobile app. It's under Suro and Disney if you want to search for it. It's a picture of me with Bill and Ted. It's my profile picture from Facebook, if you know that picture. So that being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. And AJ, any parting words?